need some help. I'm not sure how to do this.
Let me
Yes, sir.
maybe the issue potentially would be, for the moment, the false arrest could stay there, because if that's what their actual issue is, I don't think mediation is actually the place for it. However, just on the basis of their initial complaint, for staff to talk to them and see if it actually falls into some other criteria, I certainly don't think anything is wrong with that. And I think that's what she was alluding to.
Mm-hmm.
But,
So you're saying you wouldn't have a problem with like this getting to the second phase of determination?
a person might say, look, I want to make a complaint about a false arrest.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, if we have a hard and fast rule, once they say that, the conversation is over with.
Right.
Instead of saying, well, okay, what do you mean by that? Probe a little bit. Look, I tell you what, we're going to set an appointment for you to come in and talk to us, and we'll let you know if it fits the criteria that we deal with. But it's not classified as a false arrest at that moment until whoever's looking at it decides that if that isn't what it is, now we can tell you, because of what it is, no, we can't address it, but here's some options for you, and give them some suggestions of other places that they can go to deal with their complaint.
Yeah, it might be really a racial slur or something that they are calling false arrest. I mean, who knows?
Does this discussion change anyone's opinion of this particular criteria?
What it says is complaint stems directly from an arrest, and then in handwriting it says false arrest. There's a difference between those two, right?
Yeah, I put that down to clarify though, because this is not about you being arrested and making a complaint. This is specifically about your complaint being about the arrest not being proper.
So the clarification is that
Yeah,
it's false arrest.
yeah, this was written in a confusing way, so this is actually what we're talking about.
Can I just say a couple of comments on that?
Mm-hmm.
Falsely arresting someone has a lot of like really harsh consequences for that person that's arrested, and it's not like I would be inclined to want to punish the officer, but it really needs to be addressed in some way. Not only like because of all the consequences that happen to a person that is in book, but also because it sort of like encourages police to do better job about who they're arresting, like someone directly related to a crime. So I would say to keep it, because it is a really serious thing, so that it's handled by whatever the procedure is that already occurs for people that are falsely arrested. And additionally, I'm thinking back to the same concerns that you had, that a lot of people that would be alleging false arrest might still have open cases, and you don't want to mix that all up for the reasons that you had already stated. So that's just sort of my thing on that.
And just so y'all know, the most recent allegation of false arrest that I can think of that went to disciplinary hearing resulted in termination. Right, so it's considered a serious enough offense that the officer can no longer be a police officer.
I wonder if this is a question about what our intake procedure is going to be like and how much clarification is going to happen at that initial intake, because it sounds like the concern is the person might say the words false arrest and everything might shut down before they get to say that there's actually another issue that might be appropriate for mediation. So I know that I'm not totally clear what the intake is going to look like.
And to be fair, like intake happens a little differently at PIB than it does at IPM, right? Like it probably varies by intake personnel. If this group had some recommendations about how the intake process would have to go in order for our decisions to make sense, then we can talk about that at a later time. But right now, there's no, when we do intake, we hear the person's story, and from that we extrapolate allegations. That is not to say that everyone does it that way though. Some people take the allegation and that's the allegation, right?
So with, just to be a little bit more specific, if somebody comes up to us and says, you know, that they were walking on the street and, you know, that the police officer knew them from the neighborhood and grabbed them and arrested them, they might not be even saying that they were falsely arrested. They might be saying it's a bias related offense because the police officer knows them from the neighborhood. But when the IPM actually goes through a complaint, we make a determination of what administrative violations we think are at issue as well, and we name them regardless of whether the person actually says it's a false arrest or not.
But that intake is not yet standardized, so.
Right. I mean, but, you know, just to be clear here, we're just talking about what would actually take somebody out of the box entirely at the very outset.
And there's no reason why we can't be very limited in our exclusions.
And most other programs aren't.
I saw a hand up here. Did somebody? Okay, I think we can vote on this one. Can we see a hand vote? How many people want to keep false arrest as an exclusion criteria? Okay.
Now, let me ask you one question with that, but that still has the caveat of depending on what the process is, so that we can get beyond the person saying a false arrest initially.
Right.
Am I correct about that?
I think we're saying at some point we're gonna have to make comment on the intake process.
Okay.
In order for this to make sense.
So it doesn't just get included because they said false
Well, that's
arrest.
not.
We have a discussion, and before the discussion's over, if at the end, this is a legitimate false arrest, it might be excluded. Or
Right.
this might be another way to put it.
Exactly.
So how many people for?
I only saw 6.
No, I have 5 that wanted to make it an exclusion factor, and how many people did not want it to be an exclusion factor?
You didn't vote that yet.
Right.
So we're taking the vote now. How many
Yeah.
people want to eliminate this as an exclusion factor?
False arrest.
False arrest, yes.
The people that lifted their hands before had voted to include it, it remains an exclusion factor.
Right.
Those were the 5 people that I counted, so now we're doing the opposite vote.
You look confused.
That's 2.
What's up?
2, 3.
I mean, I would wanna, I just would wanna make sure that it got as far as somebody who
Right, that would
be,
be
who could have a discerning conversation. So if that means sending it to the mediator, because it sounds like some of the intake people may not have that kind of discerning conversation, so I would hate it if they shut it down.
Let me
Seems
be
better to
fair.
have the
We
mediator.
have never done like a thorough observation of intake at PIP.
Oh,
Right, but I am assuming some things based on specific situations, right? But
So intake is gonna happen at PIB, is that what you're saying?
most intake happens at PIP
For this program, it'll
for all
happen at PIB?
complaints.
Okay, so the complaints are gonna happen at PIB.
And us, right?
anywhere else.
And community organizations, right? But,
Well, this is something we need to figure out.
It would help me if we were talking about guidelines rather than rules. That, these are some guidelines when you're looking at, but to look at something and to say, well, okay, it's over here, so I'm stuck, I can't do anything about it.
Not to exclude your comment, but I just want to address the other comments that have been made. I think that it goes without saying that the mediation staff is going to have to speak to the complainant before making a decision. And so it will be the mediation staff that will be asking whether there is a false arrest or not.
but that means mediation staff is calling every one of the 1,400 or so people who complain in here. Are we really suggesting that?
And think about how the complaint come in. I mean, if it comes directly to you all, maybe that is something you all are making some type of decision on. But if it goes through PIB, then someone else is potentially making some kind of decision on that particular complaint. For those who want it to still be a part, I think the issue is when the person makes the call, whatever the process is, that just because they say it's a false arrest or whatever, that it just doesn't stop there. Somebody says, look, well, what do you mean by that? Look, we're going to set up an appointment for you to come in, but we're not sure if that's something we handle, or whatever the terminology is standardized so that the person's not put off by what's being said. So you can get to it, because if they're saying false arrest and it's something else that can be dealt with in mediation, then we want to do that. But if it is truly a complaint of a false arrest, and you just wanna provide them with the resources, and the proper direction that they can go to potentially have that addressed. And I think that's what the other side's concern is, that they thinking that it may just be shut off because on this side, we're saying, yeah, if it's a false arrest, we shouldn't deal with it. That's all we're saying. If it's a false arrest, we shouldn't deal with it. Not that if it comes in as a false arrest, but if the bottom line is it's a false arrest complaint, truly, then mediation is not for it.
Yeah.
And it just needs to be redirected somewhere else.
So all the 5 people that raised their hand before, everybody agrees with that statement?
Yes,
Yeah,
I do.
I do.
Yeah, I think that's the consensus on it.
Okay, and so the people that, that didn't want it to be an exclusion factor also agree with that statement?
Is there anyone who, regardless of the intake process, still wants to be able to mediate false arrest complaints?
And explain maybe what you mean by mediate the false arrest complaint. That means you want to have the two parties being willing to come in and sit down and talk about whatever occurred. My basic thought is, if that's truly a false arrest complaint, it really shouldn't be in mediation.
It's egregious.
I mean, that's really serious,
It's
okay?
egregious enough that it has to go.
I mean, it really needs to be somewhere else where if the officer intentionally did that, it needs to be addressed seriously with the complication, the punishment that goes along with that. If it was unintentional and somehow they did that, it needs to be addressed through training and processes to try to prevent it from that officer and anybody else in the future. So it really shouldn't be in mediation if it's truly a false arrest complaint. That's all I'm saying.
Maybe we can,
And when I say be in mediation, it shouldn't be mediated, because once it's mediated, it's basically over with. Nothing occurs that I'm aware of unless we put something in place beyond that. And that's a bigger issue than that. Whether it's unintentional, or certainly if it's intentional or whatever the case is. So,
you know, once you put something in print, it's in print. So maybe what would help me a little bit is if it read complaint stems directly from a confirmed false arrest, or some way that indicates that it's not just the words that are coming out there.
well, let's say I'm making the complaint. Let's kind of make it a little bit maybe easier for all of us to process. If I'm making a complaint, an intake's talking to me and whatever, and I'm saying, look, but I didn't have the dope, I wasn't drinking when the officer arrested me and said I was drunk in public, whatever the case is. I mean, if that's where I'm stuck on my complaint, and barring anything else I may complain about, I'm making an allegation of a false arrest. What is true or not true is a different issue. To address that allegation, my thoughts would be, should not be addressed in mediation. That's a serious allegation, certainly if it's true. If it's not true and the officer did something and, you know, I wrote up something and the person didn't realize what they were being charged for, think they charged with something else, well then that's something the officer may have realized through an investigation. Look, you didn't get a person the proper paperwork or whatever the case is. But the allegation of a false arrest is just serious to me.
And I guess what I was saying, you know, just in English is just not a
Not a
confirmed false
confirmed,
arrest, but a confirmed charge of false arrest. Maybe that's the,
No, you're just trying to say, what I'm saying is the person is saying, hey, in the end, intake or whatever, this person's actual complaint is a false arrest. Not at the beginning of intake, but when you look through it, you hear this story, you look at paperwork, whatever it is that you do, this person's allegation is actual false arrest. At that point, I don't really see it going through mediation. At that point, it needs to be directed to somebody else. Now that could be stage 2, stage 3, whatever it is. I just don't see that being a mediated issue. If the final decision is that the issue at hand with this particular citizen is a false arrest complaint. That's truly the bottom line.
All right, let me hear from Al, and then I have a suggestion.
Well, this is where I'm completely thrown off, because it's almost as, what I'm listening to you describe, it's almost as if mediation stops the life shelf of the complaint. It doesn't, in my thinking. And so in other words, say for example, in a false arrest scenario, we have, you know, someone makes a complaint, they want to tap dance into mediation, and decide this doesn't work out for me, they want to tap dance into litigation. The complaint, the litigation can still potentially end up in mediation. That's always.
Oh, you talking about mediation in court?
Yeah, it and I know we're talking about two separate
Okay.
mediations, but it can always end up in mediation. And so that's why, it's almost as if what I'm hearing is being, the mechanics of mediation is almost being presented as if it's not a serious arena in a sense to handle certain.
Well, let's be clear, we're not talking about the entire universe of
No,
possibilities.
I'm not talking about.
But what can happen within
Yeah,
NOPD.
yeah, and that's what I'm getting.
Right, so what happens to this officer as an employee of NOPD, if a civil litigation occurs, that's outside of our purview, right? I'm sorry, Sue.
Well, I think that this important point is what Captain Hargrave, right?
Yes,
is
ma'am.
describing involves a point of fact. I mean, it's not a point of a relationship problem, it's not a point of opinion, it's really a point of fact, I think, what you're describing. And so I agree that that doesn't belong in mediation, that doesn't get settled in mediation. So I think I agree with what you're saying, that if it is truly a situation where the complainant is alleging a false arrest, which we all understand what a false arrest claim is, then that should not go to mediation. But the question is, as you've said, is when the complainant says, I'm alleging false arrest, what does that complainant mean by that? Does that complainant really understand what he means when he says those words?
Yeah,
And that goes back to
But I'm
Lou,
okay with that.
Mary Ellen, who's gonna
Right,
decide?
and that's where the next step should be taken to bring them in or interview them a little bit
Right.
more on the telephone or
Right.
whatever the process is gonna be to make sure we're not letting something go that potentially could be mediated, that's not necessarily a false
Right,
complaint.
exactly.
So my suggestion is that we just add the caveat that this allegation is determined by intake staff, not the complainant.
Okay.
Well, all of it should be.
All
of
allegations
it.
are determined by intake staff, not the complainant.
Exactly.
And if we say that, how many people are willing to keep false arrest off the table for mediation? Can I see hands?
Off the table being as.
Meaning no false arrest allegations can be mediated.
Or allegation for anything should be off the table.
What do you mean?
I mean, allegation for racial slurs, allegations for anything should be off the table because that all of that has to be processed through an intake person.
Well, but just because it goes through intake doesn't mean it's not still an allegation.
Right, but what I'm saying is, that's why you have an intake process, is to determine if there is a legal reason to not mediate. I mean, you start with the supposition that everything can be mediated. And then there are some things that can't,
I see
like
what
if
you're
you have a
saying.
court case.
Let me clarify, when I say intake, I mean the person who's taking the complaint, not the person who's making a mediation determination. So what I'm saying is the person who takes the complaint hears a story and finds allegations within that story. We're basing these criteria on what the intake person's allegations are, not the stated allegations by the complainant. Does that make sense?
At that point, the intake person makes the recommendation. Well,
Maybe, we haven't decided who the decision maker is, right? But intake, right now, intake is just the person who hears the complaint and writes it up and names what the allegations are.
Now suppose it goes online, you go to the complaint form online, is that also the intake
So when
person
people
would
file
then-
online complaints with us, we use the narrative to determine what the allegations are.
So you
We
just-
don't go off of their allegations. Do you see what I'm saying?
So here's the complaint form, you fill it out, you go online, you fill it out, it says, you know, what happened, so-and-so said I had dope on me, I didn't, and they falsely arrested me. Well, you know, you got the NOPD's race, sex, badge number, employee card number, employee rank, you know, all those sorts of things, and then what happened?
Mhm.
Cop arrested me, false arrested me for possession of marijuana.
Mhm.
So that goes where?
Well, that goes to me, and I call that person to get more information. And then I'll make a referral letter that's vetted by a lawyer that has specific administrative rules cited as allegations. Do you see what I'm saying?
It's more along the scenario of the complainant that calls you up and makes a complaint that a police officer is sleeping with his wife, and that's his main complaint. But also, involved in the incident is him being arrested. But he's not complaining about that, although he says that he hasn't done it. He's complaining about the fact that the officer is sleeping with his wife.
But that's not against any rules, right? Well, it is against the rules.
You can't really mediate that either.
Right.
You need to find a divorce mediator.
By the way, we have to be out of here by 4:30 entirely, so I'm gonna wrap this up at 4:15. And that means we have about 12 minutes left to talk about this. But I feel like we have agreement that we want to exclude false arrest allegations, given this whole discussion about how allegations are determined.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So we're going with this. Use of force. This one was kind of thin, so I'm not sure what all this says. Was there anyone opposed to excluding use of force allegations? Excessive force allegations? So we all think that excessive force should not be mediated.
Excessive force should not be.
And let me just, for a point of information, state that, the jurisdiction, the only jurisdiction that I found that, there's two jurisdictions that did mediate use of force cases, and, both of them didn't include use of force cases as an absolute exclusion, but oftentimes they excluded those cases. And one of them was Seattle, where there had been large demonstrations, and they had found that in the context of of the demonstrations, for example, where there is use of force, it is extremely beneficial for those that were complaining about use of force to have the case mediated and understand the officer's viewpoint, and that was a successful mediation in that context where demonstrations had taken place. That was
It wasn't a
Seattle.
one-on-one mediation either, though, was it?
Some of them were.
Okay.
Yeah, and then the other jurisdiction was Kansas City, and Kansas City excluded many use of force cases, but where there was a use of force case which did not involve a substantive injury. So, for example, if somebody was saying that there was use of force and the only injury was their wrists were hurt because of handcuffs, that they would not exclude that type of complaint out of the box. And so those were the two jurisdictions that didn't